still taking a knee. Does the Black Lives Matter message still have meaning? Now, so many people have spoken on this particular subject, but the opinion of one man in particular has been sought after more than most, and we've been trying to get hold of this fella, and this morning we've landed lucky. We are delighted to say we've been given the opportunity to get some airtime this morning with someone who is so articulate on this matter. Well, you're about to find out just how articulate he is. Former NBA star, now psychologist, John Amaechi joins us live. John, good morning to you.
How are you, Jim?
I'm good. Good. We've been trying like crazy. Yeah, everybody wants to hear your views, John, and we are thrilled that you've joined us on talkSPORT this morning. Simon,
thank you for having me.
John, no problem. Simon's with me, so too is Trevor.
Morning, John.
Morning.
Let's get to it. John, Queen's Park Rangers Director of Football Les Ferdinand, a man we all know well, he said recently, taking the knee was very powerful, but we feel that impact has now been diluted. Is this something you feared might happen, John?
I think always, in any environment where change is really demanded, where action is wanted, then symbols are an early stage event. Symbols and symbolism are an early stage event. So taking a knee is an early stage event. You can continue to do it. It still has great validity. But then people rightly ask, people of good conscience rightly ask, right, so now what? What are you going to do to create change? So in the NBA, for example, as a sporting example, people are still wearing the T-shirts. They're still asking that Breonna Taylor's killers are held to account and all kinds of other stuff. But they're opening up their arenas as centers for voting. And that's action. That's a real thing that people can do, especially in an environment in the United States where people are trying to disenfranchise certain people from voting.
I mean, Les went further than that, though, John. He said the message now has been lost. Is now not dissimilar to a fancy hashtag or a nice pin badge. I mean, Les has virtually given up on it.
I can't control what Les does. Every day I wake up and I know that I'm going to talk about race for the moment. And when I think, oh, I'm so tired of talking about race, or when I think how difficult it is to talk about race and be challenged to be eloquent about race, I then suddenly realize I'm incredibly privileged, and maybe I should shut up about my own personal inconvenience in this moment and remember what we're trying to achieve here.
Sure.
Equity. We're trying to educate people to realize that having equity for black people does not mean inequity for white people. And that is a cause greater than my personal discomfort at having to deal with symbolism that I don't entertain. I don't kneel. My knees would explode if I tried. And I don't march. But what I do is use the gifts and the tools that I have in order to try and further this in a way that's actionable.
Sure. John, those T-shirts you mentioned with the name of Breonna Taylor on them, Formula One banned them. Was that on the cards? The T-shirt that Lewis Hamilton wore regarding the policeman, they were banned. Now, again, that is another form of an obstacle that the whole message and the symbolism, if you like, has hit.
It's not really about the symbolism that's hit. It's about the fact that there are people within Formula One and other sports who are uncomfortable with that message. To me, it's remarkable, really. If you look at sports internally, the narrative that they give is that they want their athletes to be role models. And yet, time and time again, you find what they actually mean is, I want them to be role models of the things that I'm interested in. Please sell children sugar water. Please encourage people to buy the right kind of petrol. Please encourage people to consume what we want them to consume. But when it comes to actually being a role model, and that means standing up for things that are about human dignity, suddenly then you want to curtail that. So I don't think we'd expect anything different from a large organization like F1.
Trevor, at the moment, I know you're very, very passionate about everything that's been going on with the Black Lives Matter movement and the momentum of it as well. But as I was suggesting to John, Les Ferdinand, and John's quite right, we can't speak for Les Ferdinand at Queen's Park Rangers, but he is very much saying the momentum has somewhat been lost, the direction has somewhat been lost. How do we keep the direction still going in the right way?
Well, I feel it has been diluted just by the fact that it's almost just a given now. But for me, I would like to see it remain, just because I think it stimulates conversation. Going back to what John was saying, I just think there's always been opposition, and we're quite blessed to be a radio station and a broadcaster that's just released a podcast called Coming In From the Cold, which is the history of black footballers in this country. And I think, and it's hosted by Jess Creighton, and basically it's shown the opposition against black players when we started playing. And now you're looking at the situation with Paul Elliott trying to obtain a position on the FA board, and there's opposition. You know, the FA was formed on 26th of October 1863.
Yes.
That's the 19th century. We're in the 21st century. And I think unless they change and evolve and better reflect its members, its participants, and the society that we've become, as in England, I think it needs to be reformed.
John, that's a great point that Trevor's making. We'll bring Simon in a second, but the FA, John, has received widespread criticism after saying it needs 9 months to make a detailed review before agreeing to whether or not Paul Elliott can become a full voting member of the FA's main board. 9 months. I mean, Elliott's already the chairman of the FA's Inclusion Advisory Board, yet for the next 9 months, John, he's got to be excluded from the main board. Seems crazy, doesn't it?
Well, it isn't. It doesn't seem it. It is it. It is crazy. But the FA's credibility in this area has been shot for a while. You know, if you want to lay criticism at people who use rhetoric and T-shirts and posters in lieu of actual action, the FA is an excellent example of that.
Yeah, yeah. Simon, where do you stand on this? Particularly on that point there, touching on, and John didn't mince his words. Where does the FA with this when it takes 9 months to put Elliott on the main board?
I'm not au fait, and neither is John, and neither is Trevor, with the processes that were involved in bringing somebody onto a board, whether that is standard form in order to bring somebody onto a board, or whether it is indeed Paul Elliott that's been singled out.
In the current climate, it should be a matter of urgency. It
should be a matter of ability. It should be a matter of precedence based upon someone's capabilities. And if it is decreed that Paul Elliott is the right person to go into a board environment, he's already within the confines of the FA. Where I differ from John's view, I'm in the same place. We're all in the same place. Anyone in a reasonable mind is in the same place. This is about equality. Yeah. This is about ensuring that equality and representation is where the market and where people should be looking towards. I think it's right to say that equality of opportunity doesn't mean equality of outcome, and I think sometimes along the lines people are conflating the two or confusing the two. I think taking agendas from other countries and superimposing them over our society isn't always the right way to look at things. I think there is an absolute right, and I'll be interested to see John's view, that tokenism goes so far and gestures go so far. Yeah. It does become about people that have had lots to say. People are very happy to associate themselves now with certain causes because it's populist and it's gaining and garnering the headlines. It now needs to be translated into real, tangible, measurable outcomes.
John, I'm going to get your take on that very shortly. We'll hear from you after this short break. It's Jim White and Simon Jordan. We're live on talkSPORT Wednesday, September the 30th. Trevor Sinclair is with us, and I'm absolutely thrilled to say so too is former NBA star turned psychologist John Amaechi. John, great to have you. John Amaechi, OBE, I should say. Mr. Amaechi, great to have you on board. John, I want to throw this at you. Simon Jordan, Simon, I'm not putting words in your mouth because I wouldn't dare do that. But John, Simon thinks the Black Lives Matter message shouldn't be made visibly within the sporting arena, on the field of sport. That's for sport, and for sport alone. Where do you stand on that, John?
It's incongruent with the behaviour of sport since the very beginning. Sport has always displayed messages that are about society. Sport has always displayed messages that are indeed political. Since a person ran the first marathon and dropped dead at the end of it, that was a political mission. Sport has been political since. You can't look at the FA and the IOC and all the other large institutions of sport and pretend for a second that they aren't deeply political organizations. Now, the messages inside arenas have often been messages about human dignity and about taking care of each other, and this is a consistent message about that. Black Lives Matter does not have the word only in front of it, Black Lives Matter is meant to ensure that all lives matter equally, but they don't currently. And that is not a question of hyperbole, it's a question of evidence. And it's a question of evidence across most of the social institutions that we have, including sport. So, I mean, at some stage, we have to be consistent. And again, if sport is supposed to serve a social good, then perhaps equity should be one of those goods.
What would you say to that, Simon?
Look, I don't concur with John's view that sport has allowed expression. I don't think sport has particularly steered towards political or societal messages entering the field of play. Whether, you get... I can't quite grasp John's concept around the fact that the organisations and the institutions are not apolitical. They are politically motivated. I don't see that correlation. I believe sport is an environment that changes people's perspective. It enables people to break away from societal issues. It shouldn't conflate the two. Sports stars are now so iconic that they have huge opportunities outside the arena that they participate in to influence and to leverage their own profile, whether that's social media platforms or newspapers that are dying and crying out for interviews endlessly. And I believe that if you open a Pandora's box for one cause, whether that's Black Lives Matters or whether it's transgender rights or whether it's LBGT or whatever it is, you open it for all. And I don't believe sport should be leveraged that way, because I believe sport is for something different.
So you don't think Tommy Smith and John Carlos were right to use the Olympic arena?
No, just for a second.
Then you come, John.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the choices of activism that you choose to mention and not quite get right.
Just a short list, John. I could have gone on longer if you wanted.
I'm sure you could and will. But I would just point out to you that the idea that sports are not political is absurd. The arrangement of political leaders of countries, kings and queens who line up at the feet of the FA, the feet of the IOC, for these large mega events. The idea that they don't have any influence, as we know they do, with owners of sports teams donating to and contributing to the policies of political parties. This happens in this country as well as in America. They are political organizations, absolutely. But also, athletes don't end or start inside the team and end when they leave it. They don't become role models outside of the team, but inside it too. There are issues of good conscience that we should be talking about, and the equity of all people, the plight of young white boys especially, who are struggling within the educational system because of the failings of of various governments over the years. All of these things are within the purview of role models to highlight. We know this because over the course of this summer, there are young people who ate. There are young people who did not go hungry because of the activities, the political activities, of one athlete. Now that is the role that athletes can and should play in society. That is leadership. That is what they're supposed to do.
And we concur, John. And Marcus Rashford didn't do that on the field of play. And the fact that people...
Had he done it on the field of play, would that have been a problem for you?
Well, I just think that we are opening a Pandora's... Whoever it was, irrespective of colour and creed, the idea that we leverage sport to be able to impart messages that suit a particular agenda, motivation, persuasion, leaning, cause... conflict me. And the notion that very wealthy individuals who occupy space within the sports arena by owning a sports franchise, yet occupy many, many businesses in other areas, will have a political persuasion, does not make sport politically motivated. It just happens to be that a very wealthy owner happens to own a sports franchise as well. But I do also concur. I get what you're saying with you, John.
I get what you're saying. It's an interesting dichotomy that if you own a team, then your political affiliations are incidental. But if you play for a team, then your political positions are important.
That's not what I said, John. That's you taking it.
All I would say to you is we clearly aren't going to agree, and I think I'm sure we'll agree
on lots of things, but not everything.
I'm doubtful of that. But
you don't know me well enough to say that, John, but go ahead.
Listen, it doesn't take that long to assess something like that. What I would say to you is that sometimes you have to look at organizations like the FA, and I advise 7 FTSE 100 companies, by the way. I can reassure you that 9 months to assess somebody on a board is not normal. It's not best practice. And so,
and I've employed 2,000 people in £100 million businesses, John. So we both have experiences we can bring into the fold.
Exactly, and so it's ironic, really, that you wouldn't recognise that that's not best practice where I do.
No, I didn't.
I would simply say to you, and also I would just point out to you that when talking about this subject, talking over somebody who has 10 minutes to talk is not civil.
Go ahead.
I can't tell you how the FA feels about black people. I can only conclude how they feel by the state of their institution. That is the evidence that we can look at. That's a paraphrase of James Baldwin, but essentially that's the situation. You look at how they operate. You look at the change. Black people have been in the United Kingdom for 1,800 years. The fact that it takes them 9 additional months to decide if one should be on their board is worthy of scrutiny.
I agree with you, John. I'm not suggesting that was best practice, and I'm absolutely in your camp. I believe that statistics are the beginning of a conversation, though, not the end of it. And I am not suggesting in any shape or form that a process that the FA deploy of 9 months to put a board member is best practice. But if that is a process that's deployed irrespective of colour and creed, then it's a bad process, full stop, and not a bad process because Paul Elliott is black.
John, let me jump in and go back to my friend Les Ferdinand at Queen's Park Rangers. John, Les finished by saying the other day, taking the knee will not bring about change, actions will. John, give me your standpoint, your view of what actions you would like to see in future weeks, future months, future years.
In football?
Right across the board, in football, but in all sport.
I mean, sport is, I don't work in sport for precisely the reasons of this conversation. It dulls my acuity. I think the only thing I can say is that sport has an opportunity, given the demographics of the people already involved, to look around and imagine, just look at these boards, look at these selection groups, look at these institutions and say, is it possible that all the best brains look this way? Is it possible that all the best brains look this way? And if not, audit policy, audit procedure, look at the criteria for selection and change them in the same way numerous other organizations are doing to ensure that objectively the best person gets the job regardless of demographics.
Right, John.
And if that's the case, by the way, if that's the case, it is incredibly unlikely to the point of impossibility that the organization would look the way it looks now.
And who enforces that, John?
If you have objective criteria, you don't need an enforcement. You simply have objective criteria.
Well, you need to police it as well, don't you? I know the outcome will police it, but there'll be a passage of time between...
It's funny that you didn't need to police it to get it to this point, but you want to police it at the point where there might be a black person involved.
I want to police the outcome to ensure that the outcome removes some of the cultural or unconscious bias that exists in people's minds, pervades society, and advances a case that causes great concern.
I want you to be that effusive about it now. Because who's policing it now when it consistently produces results that could not possibly be random?
That's what I'm asking, because ultimately you have policies like the Rooney Rule.
You're not asking that. I'm sorry, Simon.
Well, I am.
You're not asking that question.
Well, I am. You're not
what I'm saying to you is I've given you an option for how things could be improved. I'm giving you an option for how things could be improved. The way it is right now, the way these institutions look, they are not hiring the best possible talent. Because the talent couldn't possibly be this homogenous if that was the case. It is impossible that all the smartest people in these various strategic positions within organizations look this way. It's impossible that all the greatest technical minds in coaching look this way. So, if we reassess the criteria, if we look at the data which is available, and then use that data as part of the selection process, remove some of the subjectivity around it. So not talking about fit, not talking about experience, because we know that experience has little to no reflection on future performance. That's a data point that we understand. And when you do that, the selections you make will be fairer and more objective.
John Amaechi, I really want to say thank you so much for giving us so much of your time this morning. Thanks for joining us, John, and we'll speak again, let's hope, pretty soon.
It's a pleasure.
John Amaechi, OBE, former NBA star, turned psychologist, speaking with myself, Simon and Trevor. We're live in talkSPORT.